Sorry.
Hi, Carrie.
Hey, and I apologize. Apparently this was set up. We set it up with it having to admit people. So I will be watching that. I'm also going to make you guys co-hosts right now. Or did you I set this up, right? Because it's Zoom. Let me make you guys co-hosts so that anything we need to pull up, you have the screen.
Thanks, Carrie. Thanks, Malia.
Thank you.
No problem.
And I got a note from Eleanor and John right before the meeting with some clarification on their task, and I need to and I responded to them, and I'll bring that up when we get to other committees and share that with you guys later. But
Okay.
I'll reference where we are when we get to that on the agenda. And now I'm going to pull that up on the background while I'm waiting to see if other folks pop in.
Should I put the agenda up, Carrie?
I think that would be great to have it there as a starting point, and once we get everybody in, and then I'm going to do a short version of the, hey, we're meeting this way, and want to all agree, that this meeting has been published according to the requirements, and let's make sure we can all hear each other and where you're calling from.
Are you guys seeing the,
Yeah.
I don't know, those symbols?
Oh,
over
we're
there?
seeing the
Oh,
parent
I'm sorry.
formatting.
Let's see.
It's very pretty.
I don't even know how to do that. So
It's
Malia, thank
under
you.
view. There you go. So I want to, let's see, just checking Tom. And I'm going to be announcing that Stephen Wolf has left, and there were no other changes. Is Reverend Walton confirmed yet?
No, and
Okay.
I have a feel Tom and I would like to talk to you about that, because we're going to see now maybe if he's willing to accept that spot that
Got it.
Stephen Wolf
Okay.
is,
Oh.
yeah.
That's great. I don't
Yes.
think yeah, that's great. I just want to make sure, but I
Tom's
will
reaching
announce.
out.
Great.
Mhm.
And then Tom, is Tom going under the other committee updates?
I believe so.
That's
And
where
that's
we'll-
why, yeah, I called out homelessness committee second
then-
to give him space.
And that's actually going to be both homelessness, but it's also the eviction prevention work.
Correct. Correct.
Let me go to make sure nobody's waiting. I'm sure they are. My screen is let me get to the participants. Why is sorry, there we go.
With
I don't see any other participants yet. That's unusual. Okay, I'll keep waiting.
yeah, there was an FCRHA meeting last night.
Yes,
Well,
there was.
of course. So there could be some slow starters.
That's fine. I was just thinking about just making sure that if it if people have to be admitted separately, that I watch for that.
Okay.
Great. There we
Oh,
go.
I see
Yep.
it. Yeah, if I,
See, it's saying, so
Yeah.
just if I don't, you both are co-hosts now, so if I miss it,
I'll do
Just-
that. Yep. Absolutely.
and will you be able to bring up Tom's
Absolutely.
on the, yeah,
I won't, because I don't know what he's gonna show, and uh-oh.
what's that?
You know, I'll pull up, and I don't know what he's gonna show, or if he's gonna talk to it. I'm not sure how he's gonna do it.
That, Tom, do you want to show the thing you developed on,
Oh, you meant Tom Barnett.
I'm sorry, Tom Barnett, who has developed the
Good
piece on
morning.
yeah, not the
Hi.
other.
I do have a one pager. It's already been posted to the committee's web page, but I can share my screen as I'm talking through the document and link to that document for everyone else to get to it.
Great, then I'm going to also make you a co-host. Welcome, Jerry.
Hi, everybody.
Good morning.
Happy
Good morning.
Friday. Sorry to butt into your organizing business for the call, Carrie.
It is not at
Yeah.
all. It's just all of us getting in. And thanks for moving quickly, Jerry, on getting some things organized. And I'm going to give you a call down the road.
Yeah.
Talk to you about.
Let's do that. We made a special
Oops. Uh-oh.
married and are on honeymoon. You're not obliged to come to the meeting when you're on your honeymoon.
Good. I'd say that's fair. And there's
Let them
Michelle.
try to take me to court on that one.
And I will be joining because it'll be the last moment of the piece before the bridal nonsense. Because
Oh,
my daughter gets married next week. So
oh my gosh. So you
court-
are close to the issue.
yes, her courthouse,
Congratulations.
yes, her courthouse ceremony is that Thursday afternoon. So then,
Wow.
because this does not need to be in the minute.
Mothers of the bride have lots of responsibilities
Indeed.
and high anxiety sometimes. So keep that at a minimum.
My job is keeping everybody else's anxiety in check.
Yeah. Supposed
Carrie,
to be joyful.
Carrie, my video is not working. I'm gonna
Okay.
log off
Great.
and log on again and see if that.
Great. Thank you. Hey, Maura, welcome.
Hey, everyone.
Eleanor, welcome.
Morning.
Ava.
Hello.
Apparently,
Good morning.
good morning. Gonna just give it, if we might, a couple more minutes as people are getting in. Michelle, you're back. But still without video. That's okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure why.
Do you have
No.
your little,
Yeah, everything seems to be working. Let me see. I'm actually on Zoom a lot. I rarely, if ever, have this problem. So let me see. I don't know. I even washed my hair and put makeup on.
wow, thank you on behalf of the entire executive
But you can't see me.
committee. Well, I think since we have an observed quorum of our executive committee and a lot of work to cover, we'll keep monitoring the the participant list to see who else may join us. I'm not exactly sure. There were a couple of other people who indicated they might be able to be here, but out of respect for everybody's time, I'm going to first state that this, in a shortened version of our resolution, I'd like to state that this meeting that we are meeting virtually as a condition of the state of emergency in which we continue to operate, and that this meeting has been advertised in accordance with all of the public meeting notices, and thanks to our staff for ensuring, and the materials for this are already on the website, and any additional materials shared this morning will be shared. So now I'd like to call the roll of the executive committee and ask that you state your name and the location which you are calling from, and then I will accept a motion from someone that all voices may be heard. So first, I'm going to call the roll according to the participant screen that I'm seeing. Ava Nguyen.
Hi, Ava Nguyen from McLean, Virginia.
Thank you. Eleanor Vincent.
Eleanor Vincent, calling from Gaithersburg, Maryland.
Michelle Crocker.
Michelle Crocker, calling from Alexandria, Virginia.
Jerry Poggi.
Jerry Poggi calling in from Vienna, Virginia.
Maura Williams.
Mara Williams calling in from Stafford, Virginia.
Thank you. And Carrie Wilson, and I am calling in from Herndon, Virginia. I ask our staff as well to just register so we can be sure we all hear them. Malia Strobel. Caught her off guard. Thank
Malia Strobel here at Fairfax.
Regina Coyle.
Regina Coyle.
Great. I'm sorry, Tom Barnett.
Tom Barnett here.
Tom Fleetwood.
Tom Fleetwood here, washed my hair, no makeup though. Also, if I may, I just wanted to note, Joe Mondoro.
I just was gonna.
Okay, his
Perfect.
computer's restarting. He's on his way in.
Oh, okay. I think he might be here, Joe Mondoro. Once you get connected to audio, if you would state your name and where you are calling from, so that we may hear your voice. And then we'll go to Joe Fay. Joe Fay, would you state your name and where you're calling from this morning?
Yes, I'm Joe Fay, and I'm calling from Oakton.
Great. Joe Mondoro.
Hi, Joe Mondoro calling from Vienna.
Great. With that, I have completed the roll call. We'll go back as others. Do I have a motion that all voices?
Barry, John Boylan from Centerville. And I'll
Oh,
make
John,
a motion.
I'm sorry. I thought I
It's
called
okay.
it. I see you. Thank you.
John Boylan from Centerville, and I make a motion to accept everybody can heard from their locations.
Seconded.
Thank you, Jerry. All agreed?
Aye.
Hi.
Okay. Anyone can't hear? Great. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us this morning. Happy Friday. We do have an agenda, and I appreciate everyone's flexibility using this virtual meeting. I think it was really important early on that we meet together in person, and that will continue to be. We'll talk about that, because I think that's a great opportunity to have more robust conversation. But today seemed like a good day for a virtual meeting. We know that staff late. We have another person coming in, and we will admit them. That's Tom. So the agenda this morning, I will just want to note that Regina has the agenda up on the screen. And if there are other items as we get down to open discussion, other business, we'll let you know. My quick update is that Dr. Stephen Wolf did contact us because of his extreme travel schedule. He was so disappointed, but asked that he would resign, indicated that he was going to resign from AHAC just because he couldn't participate on a regular basis. And we did agree that we will bring him back because I know we're hungry for additional information and the work that he's done on social determinants and housing and the intersection there. And so he would love to do that. And we will look for a time we can use a special AHAC session or at one of our regular meetings to hear from Steve. So I just wanted to let you know, and the Board of Supervisors and Tom Fleetwood continue to work on some of the other appointments, vacancies. So we'll continue to do that. I will note, and perhaps we'll talk about it later in the open discussion, that of course the National Governors Conference is coming up at the in November, and I know a number of folks here. It's a great opportunity to participate and learn about what's going on and to see our work highlighted there. With that, if are there any other opening comments for the good of the order, or otherwise I'm going to turn it over to Director Fleetwood. Anyone? All right. Thank you. I am Tom. We asked Tom if he would provide us with an update, because as we all know, there's been a lot of exciting work. We have reviewed this in terms of our dashboard and the pipeline, and that certainly is going to influence our work and legislative policy side and the budget side as well. So we wanted to have Tom give us an update on what is happening there, including up to the minute recommendations last night.
Thanks so much, Carrie. I'm going to share my screen here.
Okay.
Says I cannot share my screen.
I'm going to allow you to do that right away.
Okay, great.
As soon as I find you. Okay. Sorry.
All righty.
You have been shared. You have been anointed.
Good heavens. Okay, can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because I know our time is limited. Just a quick snapshot. We currently have over 1,300 units that are in some form of construction. We just recently delivered New Lake Ann House, which is preservation by replacement. It's a beautiful new facility for those of you that haven't been there. Just, you know, it's just spectacular. But we have, you know, we're making tremendous progress on a number of our other projects. North Hill is about to start leasing here 40 years later. It's coming to fruition. So we're moving forward there. One University is coming along. So all of these battles that we fight, you know, to get these things done, you know, they really do matter, and they really do result in tangible results. So, so just wanted to kind of celebrate that there. This is our pipeline at the moment. That I wanted to just highlight a few things going forward, but we have almost 2,400 units that are in the pre-construction pipeline. And I think that is, you know, that's a testament to the work that we've all been doing together to, you know, marshal the resources, both financial and, you know, and support wise, to be able to do all of these things. So this is really important. And I want to particularly note that last night the FCRHA approved the interim agreement for the proposed project at our property at Reston Town Center, also known as Bowman Town. I need to correct the number of units is 350, not 375, just for the record. but we are at the beginning of the beginning on that one. I know that many of you have been following it, and I just want to particularly thank Carrie for having come and testified at the public hearing, and of course the indefatigable Mr. Poggi, who both testified at the public hearing and came to the public comment last night when the Housing Authority actually voted to approve the interim agreement. So stay tuned. There's going to be a lot more on that one, and a lot of opportunity for advocacy. I'll put it that way. So just to kind of take a quick tour of what we've got going on. This is Stonegate Village. It's a housing authority property that we're preparing to do a gut rehab on. We expect to get underway next year, but this project would be very similar to what we did down at Murraygate. And we're looking very much forward to having Stonegate be a sustainable and stable housing resource for the families that live there and call it home for many decades to come. Autumn Willow, this is in Mr. Harity's district. This is a senior property that's owned. This will be a senior property delivering 150 units. The Housing Authority owns this piece of property at Stringfellow Road and Autumn Willow Drive near Route 50, kind of just west of the Hanley shelter, if that makes sense to you. And we expect to close the financing this fall. Housing at Route 50 in West Ox. This is going to be 34 units of permanent supportive housing. We have selected Cornerstones as our developer, and we're preparing to move forward here. Little River Glen 1 and 4. This is both preservation of the existing and beloved Little River Glen senior housing and senior center, which is in the orange box that you see, and the development of 60 new units in the fourth and final undeveloped quadrant of Little River Glen, which is in the yellow box. Dominion Square West, this is a small project that's expected to deliver 515 units of new affordable housing and a new Fairfax County Community Center, about a quarter mile away from the Spring Hill Metro stop. This is being financed through a combination of Housing Authority, Fairfax County, and low-income housing tax credit resources, as well as $55 million from the Amazon Housing Equity Fund. Next is Somos at McLean. This is at the other end of Tyson's in the Providence district. The rezoning on this one was just approved last week, and this will deliver about 450 units of new affordable housing at 60% of median income and below. Residences at the Government Center Part 2. This is going to be 275 units on the parking lot at the Fairfax County Government Center. And it is currently going through the land use process right now. We're hoping to have this through land use in time for an application for low-income housing tax credits in March of next year. Our developer on this one is Lincoln Avenue Capital, led by our friend and colleague, Nick Bracco. Franconia Governmental Center site. This is the redevelopment of Supervisor Lusk's current office and the current location of the Franconia Police Station. We are in the selection process for a developer, and there will be more on this one soon. This is 120 units of affordable housing on that site. Last example here that I'll show is the co-location of the new Pendaw Fire Station, the replacement of the Eleanor Kennedy emergency shelter, and supportive housing and affordable housing on Beacon Hill Road, right near Richmond Highway in the Mount Vernon district. This is beginning to wind its way through the process. We're putting together financing for this one as well, and we're hoping to be able to get underway next year. And that is the end of my presentation. I'll stop sharing and I'll be very happy to answer any immediate questions y'all have.
Carrie,
Yes,
Can I-
go ahead.
I'm sorry. Tom, this is so exciting. I'm sorry I'm not on camera. I apologize. This is so exciting to see both what's been completed and what's in the pipeline. And so I just have a few observations. It would be wonderful if you could, on each of these development projects, identify who the partner is. I know in your discussion to us, you did mention a few partners, but I'm sure this presentation will be used in other places. And I think it just emphasizes the public-private partnership work that's going on in the county. So that would be great to show the diversity. We have both nonprofit and for-profit developers. The second comment is that I noted that on Little River Glen, there will be the rehab of existing units and then some new units developed. And I couldn't help but wonder, in looking at Stonegate with 12 acres of land, why there is not, in addition to renovating those existing units, why we are not contemplating building more units, adding to that.
So it's a great question, Michelle. And you know, the answer to that is that, you know, our concern there is that a redevelopment of a property that size with that many families, it's 240 units, could be challenging in Reston in the current environment.
Okay, I would just say, I totally understand that, but I would say that every affordable housing development we are doing throughout Northern Virginia is challenging. So we have a board of supervisors that has upped their game and said we're now going to create 10,000 new units. We have a supervisor in Hunter Mill who has said that he wants to see an additional 1,000 units of housing developed in his district, which is awesome. So I guess while I can understand how maybe the official position might be that's a challenge, maybe that's something that advocates or this committee should be working on, to have that amount of land in a place where we already have multifamily housing that is owned. I'm assuming Stonegate is owned by the county.
It's owned by the Housing Authority.
By the Housing Authority. It just, I don't know. That's my thought. I'd love to hear what others have to say. This work is not easy. I get that.
So, you know, a couple things I'd like to say, you know, sort of starting out on that one is that, you know, Stonegate also has some unique challenges relative to transportation and accessibility that could be very problematic in terms of a significant increase in density there. I'll also say that there are other opportunities in Reston, Bowmantown being one, potentially the Crescent being the other, that could potentially yield significantly more units than what we could yield by adding at Stonegate. That being said, we have not, you know, our intention from the beginning on Stonegate was to rehab it.
Anyone else have a comment? Jerry?
Yeah, just to echo Michelle, I think it's obvious, it was obvious to me, even at last night's FCRHA meeting, that we have some good advocacy growth that many of us should be pursuing in the Hunter Mill district area. So I don't want to underestimate our uphill challenge in that direction. But I think there's, you know, I'm very pleased to have gone to Kerry's advocacy night a week ago. Cornerstones had a huge gathering. And I think we have some tools that are starting to emerge that should make that a stronger reality. And I'd be happy to help on that and work with others to do that. We're about ready to open hypothermia sheltering season. Many faith communities within the Hunter Mill District, I think, could be mobilized with the kind of presentation you just gave, Tom, to show that we have long-term solutions to the problem of homelessness, and it is through housing. And I think we've got to win many more leadership allies to help us with that task. And Bowman Town Center will be one such place where we have to demonstrate our skillfulness.
Jerry, thank you, and for what you've done. Anyone else? I have a quick comment. Eleanor, yeah.
You know what, let me lower my hand so I don't forget.
Oh.
So I echo Michelle's excitement. Tom, it's always exciting when you look at the numbers and you see all the work that's being done. We understand and appreciate there's a lot of work that goes into getting us to where we are. And these numbers are extremely impressive. In terms of Michelle's comment, Michelle, I also echo that it's, you know, NIMBYism is alive and well. I mean, I think those of us providing these services, we meet it every day head on. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's really in your face. And so, you know, I guess what would be helpful is knowing how this committee and related bodies can support that advocacy piece that helps Tom, the work that you guys are doing to be maximized, to utilize some of the additional resources that we have that maybe we're not maximizing in that way because of the public pushback. And then my request is, it would be helpful to know for all of these developments that are going on, what percentage of these have set asides, like what the numbers are. Because for us, obviously, you know, we talk about affordable housing. And for me, the question is always affordable for whom? So while we're making strides in making it affordable, but there's still people for whom it's not affordable. You know, some communities I know, like outside the US, actually intentionally don't use affordable housing to cover everybody. They say affordable housing and then they refer to social housing, which is for people in the 30% and below. So what would be helpful would be to know, and we know there's subsidies coming into the county as well. So what percentage of these are matched with these units that are being developed so that we know that you know, the broad swath of people who need this housing are having access to it. So that's my ask. Thank you.
Thanks, Eleanor. I think those are, you know, some of the comments in terms of how we display this information allows us to make the case at budget time with advocates, all of that. And I know we can work with Tom. I would just like to offer, since it's my home community, that actually I agree that the Stonegate, you know, the area there does have some potential for redevelopment. But I would say that actually, when you look at when we look at Reston, I would frankly be concerned about I would support redevelopment. I think that could bring in a mix of market and, you know, replacing and expanding affordable. That community, all the south side of Reston, is where all of the original low-income housing was built. And so there's a little bit of a, if you will, a desert. And Tom spoke to the lack of transportation, that the opportunities at Crescent and not just Bowman Town, but the larger Reston Town Center North development offer opportunities to really mix income and to place affordable housing in locations that are right on transit, closer to jobs. And so I think that is a consideration in the Reston community as well. And it's an equity issue of, do we put more affordable? But if we're going to imagine redeveloping South County, because Stonegate is only one of many, all of the housing there is either market affordable and very, you know, low income. So Tom, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that quite ridiculously, my computer is about to do an automatic restart to install updates.
Yeah.
So I talk amongst yourselves. I'll be right back.
Sounds like he works for Secret Service.
Thank you, Tom.
My apologies. I'll be right back. Thank you.
We know that. Anyways, just a comment. I think it's something that appreciate the comments that both Michelle and Eleanor, everybody offered. What I would suggest is we'll move on to maybe our next topic on the agenda. And come back to this because I think it's going to get into some of our committees. And then when Tom gets back, if he wants to rebut anything, we'll give him that opportunity. I think it's a great segue, and I really appreciate Mr. Mondoro, who has agreed to sort of head up the Budget Finance Committee and has a number of AHAC members really interested in working. We are at that crucial time in our work to be able to look at this, the progress made, but as we did last year, point out, and as we are in regular communications with the board, pointing out that the resources dedicated to the progress we're making in those 10,000 units are not adequate. So Joe, I wanted to turn it over to you for, Regina has also provided us again with the reminders of the budget cycle and timing, but for your thoughts and as you convene the Budget Finance Committee to help us develop our recommendations.
Thanks, Carrie. So my automatic restart was at 9:29, which really was irritating to me since it caused me to be a couple minutes late, but I will acknowledge that was much better than Tom's 57. So what Regina had shared was sort of two representations of the budget cycle, which I think are really helpful to walk through. And Regina, if you could maybe put on the screen the first one, the July through May. And as we're doing that, just I think it's helpful to think about the budget cycle, not necessarily in these linear ways that we're going to see, but really as a cycle, as a circle. It's continuous. There's constantly some element of the budget under development. And I think, one of the points that I've tried to make in the past is I think it's crucial for us not just to focus on the annual process, but also to focus on that continuous cycle and the opportunities that arise at almost every point in that cycle. And I would add that we've got sort of the additional benefit for at least a little while longer of those federal dollars that we've taken such advantage of for a variety of priorities, but especially in affordable housing, that even complicate maybe, but add additional opportunities during the course of the year above and beyond sort of the traditional budget cycle time frame. And I'll talk to that in a minute. Essentially, as we look at the, again, linear progression of that first chart that Regina had sent yesterday, the July timeframe starts the fiscal year. The county is on a July 1 through June 30 fiscal year. So much of the specific activity revolves around that period of time. In terms of the development of the upcoming budget, and before I say that, just one other thing. Obviously, all at every point in time, there are at least really two budgets that we're dealing with. The year that we're in and the year that we're developing, right? And so there's the opportunity for some interplay between those as well. Talking about now the development of the budget, in the early days of each fiscal year, agencies start their scramble, I would say is the right word, to identify what really their needs are for that upcoming budget year that's going to start the next July 1. And so really right now in September and October, they're wrapping up their requests that ultimately will funnel through their organization to their deputy county executive, through him or her to DMB. DMB work will start. It'll then go to the county executive, and in December and January, the decisions about what the county executive recommendations are going to be are made. That informs then his advertised proposed county executive budget that comes out in late February, which then prompts the much more visible public conversation about the budget. It's the board's first real view of what the recommendations are. I'll go back to some of the intervening points and explain some of those and how the board has some sense of what it's going to see, but it's the first time that they see the whole thing, the whole balanced budget. First time the community sees the whole balanced budget, and it kicks off the fun part of the budget, which is sort of the conversation in the community, the identification of whether the mark has been hit for priorities and where there's some more work to do. As you all know, there's a lot of opportunity for conversation, input during those months following the release of the budget that ultimately inform what the board's action will be. Used to be in late April. These days, it's closer to early May on what the new budget will be, and those opportunities of the public hearings and the community meetings are obviously critical, and where I think we will play hopefully a very vibrant role. But there are other opportunities beyond just that sort of couple of month period that I thought made some sense to talk about today, because I think we all know sort of that standard time period. Backing up again into the development time frame, there are some points that are really important. One of them is on the agency side, really, when based on the fiscal conditions at the point in time, based on the budget guidance that the board has adopted when they adopted the budget year that just began for the next year, based on the information that staff has, there are directions given to county agencies about the development of their budget. That's in the July-August timeframe. And agencies then take that as their guidepost for pulling together recommendations. As you can imagine, many years, that's a fairly stark picture that's painted at that point in time, in part because of the lag between that information and ultimately what the county executive and senior staff will know in January, February about the true conditions leading into the budget. So really the length of time that we're talking about causes part of the problem. Obviously, the economic cycle is a part of it. The balance of priorities. It's very helpful, obviously, for the board to give staff priorities, but it also narrows the conversation, as it appropriately should. And so as the discussion begins within the organization, staff is looking at all of that mix of information and pulling together very specific requests for their agencies. The role that DNB plays in pulling all that together in late October, November, leading into those December, January meetings is important. And there are a couple of pieces of information that are developed at that time, which really inform the discussion. First thing is, based on the county formula, the information that's required to calculate what the market rate adjustment for employee increases comes together by early November. And so while there's a lot of speculation and calculations run with preliminary data prior to that, it's not known until early November what that number is. That calculation and the subsequent identification of the commitment to that employee pay increase, I'm going to say this in a positive way, really helps frame then the rest of the conversation. You can add some negative connotation to it as well, but it really helps frame the conversation. In addition, there's some preliminary information about a lot of categories, but some really important categories on the revenue side, like real estate and personal property, that won't be finalized until January. But based on sort of the cycle and the fact that the data for those two revenue sources, again, specifically real estate and personal property, are calendar year based, not fiscal year based. And so in November, there's a lot of information. It's not final, as I said, but there's a lot of information. And so the flexibility on the revenue side that exists, because such a large chunk of our revenue pie for the general fund comes from those two categories, becomes a little bit clearer. And that is the reason that at the end of November, this year, I believe it's November 22nd at 3 o'clock, the end of November, typically right before Thanksgiving, the Board of Supervisors and the school board meets jointly, and there's a joint presentation from both of their budget staffs that identifies the information that's available at that point. And so a fair amount is known about the revenue picture, and a lot is known about the expenditure side. There are still a lot of gaps. Some significant ones include the fact that nothing is known about the state budget at that point. That's more relevant for schools than it is for county, but it's an important element of the ultimate conversation. There are some relatively preliminary estimates for enrollment for schools, for example, at that point. That doesn't really come until later. But there's a lot that's available. And so the conversation at the end of November, I think, is really helpful for groups like ours to get a sense of what the dynamic for that annual process is going to be and how we can influence it. So if you didn't already have it on your calendars, I'd suggest that you put it on, or plan, as a sleep aid some time later over the Thanksgiving weekend to watch it in recording. Those elements that I've already talked about then really go into the building of that county executive's recommendation, again, supplemented by final revenue numbers for real estate, personal property, as well as some of the other major categories like sales tax, et cetera. Typically that first week in January. The books are closed for real estate by that point. So all of the sale information of the previous calendar year is available, because that's the basis for assessments. And so then the information is known, and all of the sort of final balancing can be done. Jumping ahead then to the public conversation, just one more time, and then I'll go back to sort of the in-cycle stuff. As you all know, the board responds to the county executive's proposal. Some previous budget chairs talked about, the fact that the county executive proposes and the board disposes, which really is the dynamic. The county executive has the responsibility to make his or her recommendation, recognizing that it's required to have a balanced budget, certainly operating within the parameters that have been set by the board, many longstanding, many specific to that budget year in the budget guidance. But there's a lot of flexibility as well that accrues to the board as they evaluate what the ever-changing, in some cases, but often constant needs of the community are. And so the input from the broader community, groups like us, I think is really important and valuable to them. And one of the other things that I'd said previously is, as we look at our advocacy, so a little bit of a plug here outside of the budget cycle conversation, but I think it makes sense for us to identify sort of the relationships that exist between ourselves and board members and take advantage of those in terms of the messaging and the advocacy, again, that we want to address. That all then culminates again in that board action. There is a lot of public conversation that goes on, and then there's some behind the scene conversations that go on. The budget chair, which for us has for many years been also the chairman of the board, which I think makes that job even harder, but I think adds a lot of, there's some positive elements to the dynamic. The budget chair meets individually with his or her colleagues as he or she develops that budget recommendation, what they're going to do to change the county executive's recommendation, to still maintain a balanced budget, to take into account new information that's accrued since end of February, and to incorporate the community input. And then that obviously results in the adopted budget. But as I said before, as we're working on, county staff are working on, and the community is influencing that budget, we're in a current budget year, right? And so right now in October, we're in fiscal 23, which started on July 1, and a couple of things happen. Information about revenues changes, not in enormous ways typically, because one of the nice things about our reliance on real estate and personal property, which has a lot of not so nice things about it, but one of the nice things is once the budget's established, because of how high our collection rates are, we're going to get those dollars. There's not a whole lot of variability between those estimates and what comes in, because they're set on information that's already accrued. But there are other categories where the economics of, the larger financial cycle, the dynamics of specifics in Fairfax have an impact. And so there are opportunities at our quarterly reviews, and in different points in time, we've done sort of a different number of them. The current paradigm is we do the carryover review, which is the end of the year that just ended June 30th, and the first changes to the budget that was adopted the previous May, which staff works on and goes to the board at the end of July, and they act on in September. And then the third quarter review, which is based on information that county staff have through about the middle of February, goes to the board in early March. They act on in May. Sorry, well, it used to be April, in May. And in addition to, typically, there have been a couple of times in the past when this has gone the other way, but typically, because of the conservative approach that the county takes on revenue projections, typically the availability of some additional revenue, priorities or new things that have come up since the last budget action can be addressed. And I think if we were to look at the list that Tom went through with us previously, we can identify the success in terms of affordable housing, of accessing those dollars to move those projects forward. Because clearly we've got a little bit of a hole, or a lot of a hole, depending on your perspective, in terms of building into the baseline budget the resources that are necessary to meet the goals of the county. But we've been very successful in accessing those quarterly review dollars for these purposes. And there are a couple of reasons for that. I think the sort of the bluntest is at those periods of time, there's less competition for those dollars, right? When we're building the annual budget, and the reason I focused on the MRA calculation in November is when you're looking at dealing with the pay dynamic, when you're looking at dealing with the enrollment dynamic, when you're looking at dealing with all of the other array of competitors for budget dollars that are taken into account at that point in time, the conversation, rightly so, I mean, putting a budget together is not an easy process. Chairman Bulova used to say it's like making sausage, because you're trying to bring in all of those pieces. It's hard. At the quarterly reviews, the budget is set. Again, most of the time there's a little bit more money available. And the pressure on those is oftentimes easier. And that's not attributing any, sort of qualitative value to that. But I think the reality is that we've been able to access those dollars and move projects forward. And I think one of and sorry, just jumping off the cycle bandwagon just a little bit again, one of the opportunities that we have as a group is to make sure that our pressure continues on the decision makers so that we don't get to a point where we don't have the resources in the bank, proverbially, for Tom and his folks to move forward with projects that are ready to go. And so I think we've been successful in replenishing those dollars at quarterly reviews to make sure that for the most part, that's happened. We're at a point where we need to do that again because Tom's been so successful. Tom and his team and the advocates, et cetera, have been so successful. And that list, demonstrates that. And so looking to the third quarter discussion, the carryover discussion, I think is really important. As I mentioned before as well, we've got the access to those remaining federal dollars, the stimulus dollars. And there are a number of efforts underway at the staff level based on direction from the board and certainly the influence of the advocacy community to allocate that last tranche that hasn't been allocated. And there's a lot of pressure to put another big chunk into affordable housing. I'm hoping that we'll hear sort of where that stands very soon. And that should help inform sort of the advocacy for the annual process, because I do think we want to keep pressure on that. But it is, I think that we'll be back to a point where there will be a little bit in the bank so that the projects that need it, when they need it, have it. I talked for a while, so maybe I'll stop and take a breath and see, Carrie, if that sort of addressed what you were looking for and see if what people want to talk about in addition.
That was great. I think it's the best citizens budget, not just 101, but 301 I've ever heard, but really helpful to understand and how it impacts us. We'll go to Tom and then open it up for a conversation. Thanks, Joe, and then Jerry. Tom Fleetwood.
I'll just first note that I'm glad that Joe Mondoro has finally learned something about our budget process. His progress in this respect is remarkable. Joe, first of all, thank you so much for doing that and for framing it with such clarity.
Yeah.
And I will just to add on a couple of very brief points, if I could. Joe's absolutely correct that we're in the process of preparing a recommendation to the board with respect to the use of a portion of the remaining ARPA funds. And I think that, we're hoping to have that concluded and out to the board within, the next week to 10 days. So that is coming soon. There are, just as an aside on that, I'll just note that while the guidance that came out from the administration is extraordinarily helpful relative to affordable housing, there are risk factors that remain for its use as a loan for the very fact that it is based on guidance, not regulation. So just that's what's taking so long in sorting this out in terms of our recommendation to the board. I'll also note that in terms of the overarching steps that have been taken, the board has made very significant progress in terms of responding to the budgetary recommendations of both the Affordable Housing Resources Panel and the Preservation Task Force as well. As of right now, we stand at all in on baseline at just about a penny. But based on the recommendations that those two groups have made, we're still about a penny away from a baseline perspective, from meeting those recommendations more fully. So I wanted to note that. I wanted to underline also the particular importance of these mid-year budget cycles, which have added very significantly to our work. While less predictable, those resources have been arrived just at the right time to make projects move forward. And then finally, based on what we have in front of us. You saw the pipeline. There are a lot of pre-pipeline projects as well that are not reflected, and that we are, that we're, fostering, and sort of shepherding along here. Taken together, they represent a very significant need relative to future local subsidy. So, just wanted to lay all that out as well. But again, Joe, thank you.
Great. Then Jerry, then Michelle. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joe. That was terrific synopsis. I learned a lot every time I hear you go through one of these, but I also think it's our goal, should be one of our goals for you and your committee to deepen that knowledge base in the membership of the Budget Committee. So we're not just reliant upon your deep knowledge, but we are commanding more of it through more voices and more heads thinking carefully about how to do it. There's a couple of things I just wanted to raise. We transfer more than half of the revenues coming into the county to FCPS. They have a vested interest with us, and they also are landowner managers to the affordable housing equation. It's essential to recruitment retention for all the workforce within our county, but particularly acute within the school system. So I'd urge Kerry, you and Tom and others to think about future membership on AHAC. When could we get the intersection with the school systems in a more official way? The second thing is I'd like to also understand, Joe, I loved your sense of cycling as a constant revolving, turning issue, both current budget and future budget. But we also have one other cycle that becomes very relevant, and that is the political cycle. So every 4 years, we re-elect a school board, we re-elect the boards of supervisors, and the terms of the debate really become essential for us to consider how do we ensure we continue fidelity towards the affordable housing mandates that all of us feel so near and dear. Happily this year, when I hear the chairman and I hear other members of the board offering little speeches, the success on affordable housing seems to be one primary element that gets into their dialogue. But we really need to think about how does this coming year help us better frame what we're doing, because it's also the election year cycle. And then the last thing that I would say, or last two things, one is my friend Conrad would always argue, what are the dedicated funding opportunities that we could seek to pursue on into the future that might more guarantee us having the budget resources? And then the last thing is more of how does all of this get shaped by our bond rating system? Because that also seems to be a quintessential determinant about how much risk we could pursue, including risk in affording more affordable homes projects. So thank you so much.
Joe, did you want to respond to that? And then we'll go to Michelle.
Yeah, why don't I focus on the second one? I'll leave the political one aside for a second. I think that certainly, I don't think anyone argues, or at least I haven't heard recently, an argument about the positive elements of maintaining the integrity of the bond program. And I think that over many, many years, the balance that has been achieved has been necessary to maintain that. For those of you who were on the Affordable Housing Task Force a number of years ago, one of the conversations had been, how to maximize the use of the county's general obligation bonds for the program. And the stance that I had taken at that point, which I would take, I think, today as well, is that while there's a role for it, I think it's the primary advocacy that we should be taking is for those revenues that support, sort of the outright contribution from the county for their piece. We have demonstrated over decades the ability of the RHA to use their bonds to fill gaps as well. And I think that balance of cash, because we always need some, right? And those RHA bonds has been effective. That's not to say that there aren't situations where, a county bond might make sense for a particular project. But I think that, and this is certainly, it should be part of our toolkit. But I think our better bet is accessing those revenues. And one element of that, although I do think it's as more and more of the conversation, Jerry, as you alluded to, on the political level, does revolve around the necessity for and the successes of affordable housing, I think this becomes less of an issue. But RGO bonds require voter approval. And so hinging some of these projects on that in an untried arena, again, for the voter approval side of it, also, I think is an element that needs to be taken into account. Hopefully that was a helpful answer.
Concur.
Thank you. Michelle?
Yeah, just really quickly, Joe, that was such an excellent tutorial on the budget that I'm thinking about, if this is recorded,
Yes.
snipping out your presentation along with this wonderful graphic and posting it, because I think part of what we need to do is spread information and knowledge about how things work in Fairfax County. So if that's okay, I plan to do that. And the only other thing I'd like to say is that it is exciting that we're looking at additional resources at the county level, but I think it's really important that we all understand that there is a limited number of tax credits that are available at the state level. And this March is going to be a monster year. I know of 8 or 9 huge projects from across Northern Virginia that will go in for credits, and not all of them will be funded. So I think we need to realize that there are other factors besides the local money, and we all need to work. There are efforts with our national partners to expand low-income housing tax credits, obviously to expand vouchers so people can use those. So there are other constraints to housing development, not to mention inflation, labor shortages, and supply chains. And I've, in just my discussions with 8 or 9 different developers, they have all said that the deals that they submitted 18 months ago, none of them are valid anymore because of the increase in costs, and everyone's scrambling to figure out how to cover those shortfalls. And their first knock on the door is to their local government partners. So we're in for challenging times. As exciting as things are right now, I think we need to have our eyes wide open and realize we're in challenging times. And sorry to burst anybody's bubble.
Thank you, Michelle. Anyone else?
Carrie,
Yes, Tom.
I just wanted to underline Michelle's last comment, that is absolutely true. I will be in front of the board on November 1st for just such a situation involving a project we have with a private partner. And it is becoming incredibly a very acute issue. And when you also couple it with the challenges on the private activity bond availability at the state level, there are very significant challenges with this.
And I'm not seeing any other hands. I would just like to add to all of this, and that is a very real issue, and we're seeing it in the work that we're doing on projects. But I would also like to ask Joe and his committee and all of you to think about the services integration piece. And because, for example, Cornerstones is partnering with Lincoln Avenue Capital and the residences at Government Center to really design the community resident services, but there is no mechanism for planning, reserving the use of, for example, subsidies for childcare, which is the second most expensive household expense for anyone that needs to be addressed, and even at the state level. So we do advocacy there, not to mention, I know that Maura, Joe, and Eleanor could go on for days about in terms of permanent supportive housing and the work that we're doing. So it's an ongoing thing that we think of housing in this silo and not the really important resources and staffing that it takes, and connections to CSB resources and others, health, all of those. So my soapbox.
If I could, just in response to that, Carrie, I think that's absolutely an important element of the conversation. And I think that, the resolution of it, the successful resolution of it, is going to need to evolve over, some period of time. And so perhaps one of sort of our to-do items in that column is to really focus on working into the board's discussion as part of the 24 budget guidance that direct staff to incorporate some factor or dynamic or some element of planning for that into that September, October, November part of the process, because I think for that kind of operational stuff, that's the better place for it to be. And so if we could, more than chip away at it, make some significant progress over, a couple of years, I think that would be an approach that makes some sense. And I think that budget guidance may be the way to sort of get our foot in the door. It's been there in the past, but sort of secondary to the development of the housing. And so if we have it as a standalone, maybe that would be helpful.
Thank you. I think it goes to the integration of, again, how departments work and how different funding streams. And,
Yep.
We love being invited to the party to be part of affordable housing developments, but it's like, great, come to the party, and sorry, the pro forma for housing only pays for a portion of the rent. And y'all got to figure out the fundraising for childcare and other resident services. And again, a lot of it's education. I had a great conversation, as an example, with Supervisor Harity, who asked about why not more Head Start, and having to explain to him that at the federal level, there hasn't been a new early Head Start allocation authorization of resources in years. The county would love to do more of that versus others. So thank you for that suggestion. And I know we're at 10:34. I think that was helpful. And just appreciate, and Joe, we will work with you then because of the timing to get that committee up and running however you would like to see fit. There are a lot of people anxious to help you with that. And Jerry Hoji has taken the reins on the legislative committee. I don't think, Jerry, could you just share basic information? Because I know you have a meeting next week.
Yeah, so I don't want to take up a lot of time. There is an agenda for the meeting next week with some resources identified in the agenda. Regina, I think, has posted it to our committee website. Take a look at that. Because the meeting is next Thursday, and by the painful happenstance of a doodle polling type function, we have a few members of the executive committee who wanted to be part of that but can't on that time. I will offer to each of you, I'd be happy to do one-on-one conversation to make sure we get your issues onto the agenda. The two things that we see as really important is, one is looking at the draft legislative program for the county and the human services issue paper, I don't believe anybody will quibble with the affordable housing elements. The question is, what more? And so we'll have a focus in our conversation about the manufactured task force recommendations and any things to be sitting within the Joint Legislative and Audit Review Commission that we should be thinking about as a committee. The hopes would be that we could give guidance back to the executive committee on a recommendation memo to the boards of supervisors that will be effective and timely within their pursuit of a final legislative program for 2023. So I'll answer any questions if people have them, or take any input if you have it.
Jerry, thank you. I'm sure, and especially for the offer to take the time to talk with people. I was going to say, if you think you need more than an hour for your meeting next week, just let us know. We'll extend the time. So. No.
Discipline. Let's.
Right. Wonderful. Then I'm going to take a page out of that. Michelle has put a note in the comment section about, again, our ability to, the need to reiterate some of the cost issues, the challenges that we're seeing based on just the previous conversation and now this. And that is one of the things that we want to talk about as this work is coming together, having a variety of voices, you know, regularly sharing, including AHAC formally regularly sharing feedback, which we have attempted to do, but I think there's room for growth. That is kind of what, again, this executive committee sort of monitoring the flow and the work pace and all that we have to do. And we had a couple of other updates on that. And then I wanted to share with you a couple of other committees with information, what's happening there. But there are two items. One is on the homelessness committee. Want to just bring back some perhaps unfinished business or just get some clarity on our way forward. And then the second is that, so there's both the homelessness task force that has been working, committee that has been working and made recommendations. And then Tom Barnett is also going to share a little bit about an eviction prevention cross-system work group. This is a outgrowth of work that's being done by the county overall, but also as feedback to the presentation we had earlier this year by Keisha Dotson on where we stand with that. So on the homelessness first, I at our last meeting, Eleanor and John gave a very good report with recommendations that related to our decision on applying for COC funds for the special announcement about the need to really ensure that the process of inclusive community engagement, that we take that seriously and spend some time with an objective outside party who can help facilitate that, and to, you know, knowing that we can't get that done by November, I'll let you all say, but you made a number of recommendations in addition to the questions that do come up about, you know, how this information, the work that staff are doing, and will report on November 22nd to the Board of Supervisors Housing Committee, what this all means for us for the long term, perhaps standing up a new governing board. So there were some recommendations. In my feeble mind, I thought we got sort of an endorsement from AHAC to that we were on the right course, and to charge staff who were going to look into a contract with someone to facilitate community engagement. And then we recognize we're going to need to come back and talk with the Toms about, you know, what's next. Eleanor, will you feed in? And I'm not sure where we landed, but I thought we got a sort of an amen to your report and a recognition that you've done as much as you can now until we set up the next steps.
Yeah, Carrie, appreciate that. I think that as John and I were talking about this, it wasn't quite clear that everybody's on the same page, just in terms of, we want to make sure that everybody knows that the work that we can do as and I actually prefer the task force designation more than the committee, right? Because it's more intentional, it's time limited, you do it, you move on. But just wanting to make clear that the task that we had to tend to, we've done as much as we can. And that with the recommendations we've made, our understanding is that now either this executive committee or the full AHAC, the full committee is moving that along and assigning those responsibilities where they lie. I know that Tom and Tom already took on a couple of things that they were gonna go look at, but I'm not sure even they're clear of what the process looks like from now, what additional resources need to be mustered, and all of that. So just wanted to make sure that we're on the same page. And then also just to bring up the recommendation about the COC governance and the request or recommendation for re-energizing, revisiting, reviving, whatever the is, a governing board, because there are things there are questions that keep coming up that point to a certain level of confusion in terms of what the different roles of these different committees that we have are, and who's responsible for communicating what, in what timeline, and so on and so forth. So that's why this is coming back on board. And if we're all saying, yeah, we're clear on what the plan is, then we will feel as if we've been absolved of taking any other additional steps as a subcommittee at this point. And John, please feel free to jump in if I miss the mark on any of that.
No, thank you, Eleanor. I agree with you, but I'm not clear, and I should be clear. If I'm kind of being one of the chairs on the task force, and governance is a big deal, and so now that we're a council as AHAC, we need to make sure the governance is crystal clear and people don't run off in different directions. And so I think the governance of the task force achieved what it was told to do and came back with a report. That's done. Check. And that's why we're good.
Yeah.
What I would like, and I don't want to prescribe what the next step would be, but I think if you would like to pursue that phase 2 to look at the equity issues and everything else, you need to come back and say, there needs to be another task force that looks at phase 2. It can comprise of the same people that run that group, but there are a number of people that are really passionate and are ready to go to work to do things, which is great. But I think there should be something defined from AHAC that says, here's your goal for phase 2 to go look at these equity issues, come back with a report at this date, or however that works. The third thing is, I think Tom needs a homelessness strategy refresh. Now, where that comes from, that's almost, I don't think that's that phase 2 group. I think that's something that is important enough to stand alone.
Yeah.
And I think if we're going to do a strategic plan and help Tom do that, that's something else that we should look at. Now, whether that comes from AHAC, it comes from the COC, I'm not as deep into that as to know where it should come, but I think there should be something that defines for Tom, here's a group of folks that want to help you build a strategy, because that's what we need to be pointing to. Obviously, we still do great things, and Tom certainly is able to do great things without the strategy. But if it's that important to us and we look at the history of what's there, we've got to figure out what that strategy is and how it fits with the whole COG and everybody else in the region that's working off of different strategies.
Great. Thank you. I know Tom Fleetwood will respond and I'll follow up. Thank you.
So just a couple of things if I could, and then I want to be able to hand off to Tom B. Number one, I think that it is clear that in order to carry out, what I've described it to Supervisor Faust and others as, the necessary long-term second phase of this work, is that there needs to be Eleanor, I'm going to go with another word, a regeneration of the homelessness governing body. And you may recall that when AHAC was rechartered as a council, that part of the direction that we got was that the incorporation of the homelessness practice into AHAC was essentially to be reevaluated after a couple of years. And I think we're at that point of necessity. And so, you know, I think that, you know, as Tom Barnett and I work based on the recommendations of the homelessness committee to you know, to build our collective presentation to the board for the 22nd of November, that what you can expect to see is, you know, kind of a multi-part situation where there is the evaluation of our contractual work and sort of the value for dollar component that our Office of Internal Audit is assisting us with. There is going to be sort of the immediate actions component of it, one of which will be moving forward, one of which I believe will be is moving forward with rechartering a new governing board. And then the third kind of act of the presentation, if you will, is sort of the plan for the plan, right? And so I just kind of wanted to give a little bit of shape in terms of what to expect going forward, based on what we heard from the homelessness committee, and really just also to make sure that, you know, that we're on the same page, and that, you know, and that we have a consensus that that's the path. So thank you for letting me ramble a bit. So, but happy to answer any questions, and Carrie, if it's okay for Tom B to hop on here and clean up any mess that I've just made.
I think there's some consensus with the noddings of heads. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have a lot more to add to what everyone has already said, but I think if we're going to update a strategic plan, having a governing body that has a direct connection to the board, as well as members with lived experience of homelessness, is going to be vitally important. And if you look at examples of neighboring jurisdictions that have updated strategic plans, they're not as large and ambitious as the 10-year plan was. They're much more focused on like an annual or 3-year process on what are the priorities for our community that we're going to be focusing on. And I think that is a very pragmatic approach. But the first step really is having a governing body that incorporates service providers, people with lived experience, and perhaps people appointed by the board members themselves.
Thank you both. And I think I'd like to have I'm going to say one thing. If you heard Tom Barnett said something that was very important, it mentioned service providers being at the table. The last governing board, despite having the most experience in day-to-day, that service providers were excluded, even though we were partners. And so I think that's a wonderful evolution, as well as being able to beef up the have support and advocates from the business sector and others. So I will just say an amen to that. If that was clear, could we get the executive committee to, formally agree that this is what we are endorsing and recommending? I'm making that motion. If there is a.
I second.
Thank you, Michelle. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? And again, just reiterating the incredible work, which is to include not only our chairs, but Maura and Joe Fay and others who do this work every day, and our wonderful staff. Tom Barnett, I'm going to give you a few minutes now to follow up on the eviction prevention work, which is, and I wanted to note that this is, again, not only a committee that we identified as people having some interest, but, again, a larger body of work that the county has been doing.
Thank you, Carrie. I'm going to, well, it looks like the screen is being shared already. So what I'm going to do is walk through a description of what this eviction prevention cross-system work group is. It is building off of the work that's happened over the past 2 years during the worst of the pandemic. And while we had tremendous resources around preventing evictions, as well as legislative support, such as the eviction moratoriums. But so we're kind of rechartering ourselves and thinking about the future of what this work group does as it's in this important milestone and transition. For most of you have heard from Keisha Dotson's presentation from the Department of Neighborhood and Community Services, nearly all of the emergency rental assistance from CARES Act and ARPA has been spent, and local county funds are being used to kind of bridge this transition to where we're essentially returning to normal resources around eviction prevention. But we're not returning to sort of the business that we've always done it. We've learned some important lessons during the pandemic. This is a new name for the group. It is very clearly a staff-led work group. It used to be called a task force, and people were confused that perhaps this was charged by the Board of Supervisors themselves to be leading this effort, but it's not. It's a work group, and as such, it's really a place for information sharing, to problem solve, as you see in these different purposes and functions here, improving processes, coordinating the messaging. We can act as a consultant, serve in a consultant role with other groups that need input on how the county and its partners are preventing evictions. It's also coordinating the collection of data around eviction prevention, specifically around specific household information to coordinate service delivery, but also on the public dashboard around evictions. It includes counts by geography in the county on how many writs of eviction are being issued. Sadly, those numbers have increased significantly since the end of the moratorium, as well as the dwindling of these federal resources. But we've have a lot of successes to celebrate it as well. Some newer initiatives that are going into effect soon and also funded by ARPA. This isn't here on the screen, but I wanted to mention two things. There's going to be an expansion of legal services with work with the legal services in Northern Virginia, as well as nonprofit community-based organizations like Facets and Cornerstones are showing up in the courts and helping connect people to coordinated services planning. So intervening right there where people we know are in housing crisis. So there's been other workflow process improvements. The group's been very nimble. This new group is going to be meeting monthly on third Tuesday of every month, 8:30 to 9:30. It's co-chaired by both myself as well as Sarah Allen, who's the Deputy Director for the Department of Neighborhood and Community Services. Obviously, NCS has done a tremendous amount of work through coordinated services planning around eviction prevention. They lead a lot of this and coordinate a lot of the financial packages. But other organizations that have representatives on this work group, it includes Cornerstones, Department of Cable and Consumer Affairs. They have a whole tenant landlord mediation services and complaint database. Of course, the Department of Housing, Community Development, Management and Budget, Neighborhood and Community Services, Facets, Legal Services of Northern Virginia, Northern Virginia Affordable Housing Alliance, and the Sheriff's Office. This partnership with the Sheriff's Office has been one of the more notable aspects where we've been able to share data in ways that we didn't pre-pandemic. We have committees of this work group that are both ongoing and sort of ad hoc. Ongoing wise, we have this data agreements and partnerships, and that's what I was just referencing in terms of the sheriff's data. We're able to get individual household information as well as overall counts of these writs of evictions, share this publicly, but also help us direct where interventions are needed. It's currently led by Abdi Hamoud from NCS and Michelle Gregory from Department of Management and Budget. Our newest committee, which just started up earlier this week, is one that's exploring the development of a sequential intercept model, inspired by the work of the Diversion First initiative. The idea is to create essentially a process map or workflow and identify those points at which the Fairfax County partner organizations can intervene in the standard processing of evictions so that families and individuals don't have to lose their housing. This is something that has been successful with Diversion First, and we think there could be some lessons learned here as well. And so we would, we're starting up this work group. You see the leadership here, both from our Office to Prevent and End Homelessness in HCD, as well as Maura Williams, but also including additional members from across the county. I would say that we are happy to include more people, both in the work group and its committees. So as there may be AHAC members here that are interested in participating and learning and sharing, we welcome you, and please feel free to reach out to me by email, which you would find here on this invite. So that's it for this one pager and a description, but I think we are going to be looking at this next fiscal year as a transition period and figuring out where does this work continue and reside. We're certainly not in the same place we were during the pandemic with all the resources. So we're always trying to figure out how can we complement the work of other groups and bodies like AHAC in the future. I'm happy to take questions. I see there's two hands.
Michelle. Yeah, Michelle, and then.
Yeah, just Tom, really quickly, this is really exciting, the thoughtfulness that you all have put into this, building on the work that's been done. I will personally apologize for not being as engaged on those Tuesday meetings as we should be. One group that I notice is clearly absent from this work are some representation of landlords. And when we partnered with Legal Services of Northern Virginia to do the regional eviction prevention task force that we had for 2 years, landlords were at the table. And it was helpful for them just to begin to hear what the concerns were from the tenant side. And some of them even to truly figure out how they could be part of the solution. And there are lots of best practices that have been identified for better landlord-tenant relationships. I note that the landlord-tenant commission that the county has is represented through the Cable and Consumer Services Group. But it's the last time I checked, which was a while ago, there were like 5 vacancies on that commission. So I don't know how engaged they are, but certainly they could, if they were beefed up, they could be a bigger voice in helping to both educate and inform and communicate with landlords, which I think is sorely needed as part of it's hard to deal with this issue with only kind of one side of the equation listed. So those are my thoughts.
That's an excellent point, Michelle. Thank you. And then I think we should talk about this with our partners in the next meeting about how we engage landlords in these conversations.
Eleanor, did you have something?
Yeah, I was going to say, if we don't have enough time, I'll reach out to Tom directly. I am like Michelle, I have to apologize for being removed from this, because as I sit here, I'm thinking we are both a landlord and a service provider, and I absolutely think we should be part of this. And Michelle, to your point, that's the other thing I was thinking, that we're not going to get very far if we don't include landlords in this discussion, because the reasons for evictions are multifaceted, as we all know. So while there are things that we can throw at it, just in terms of helping people with rent payments and things that federal funding can help us with, there are lots of other layered issues. And sometimes some of it, which include NIMBYism, quite frankly, and the fact that not everybody follows fair housing necessarily, and just finding that balance between advocating for people's rights of tenancy and also making sure that other people who are being impacted by things they're doing, their rights to peaceful enjoyment of their home are also protected. So it's a very complicated topic as well. So Tom, I will definitely be reaching out to you, because I think there are lots of things that we can do, but landlords, HOAs, those are people that you absolutely need to have come to the table in some way, shape or form. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Eleanor. I look forward to talking.
Great. We have reached 11 o'clock. We have a couple of other items. Is there anything? Oh, Jerry, is your
Yeah, I just was going to say that because of the analogy to the diversion first, I mean, one thing your group might be thinking about is crisis intervention training in this domain, which, is unique and it's different, but given the size of our county and the number of entities that would have to be engaged regionally, we should really be thinking about whether the lessons that you're learning early on need to become part of a more formalized crisis intervention training program.
Thank you, Jerry. And I'll say certainly there is work that can and should be done on the legislative side in terms of renter protections, and I'd love to share information between our two groups here, the work group that I'm co-facilitating and the legislative and policy committee.
And maybe in the budgetary arena for Joe Mondoro's group. So I think we all want to see, at least at the executive committee level, that we are mutually reinforcing the purposes of committees such that we're not siloed and losing the vibrancy of deeper discussions on particular topics occurring elsewhere, but not flowing into the actions.
And Jerry, that is a great point, because I think that is what this executive committee, once we're rolling, our job is to ensure that information is cross-flowing and among the AHAC committees, as well as where we can have input on agency staff-led operations. Thank you, Tom. And that what has been going on for the last 2+ years has been tremendous, and the leadership there. So really quickly, because we can come back to this at our next meeting, but there is a couple things. One of the groups of interest, fair housing, as you all know, COG has been working on regional fair housing, and the Board of Supervisors is going to hear an update from COG at its November 22nd meeting, maybe the Housing Committee meeting, I believe. But they are going to be taping the presentation and recommendations that will be widely available to all boards, authorities, and commissions. With Fairfax County, Mary Payton and I have been working to get perhaps a special presentation to AHAC to understand that. We're going to build off their recommendations will be coming forward, and I know that groups are already looking as to how any of those suspected recommendations, state, local, can be fed again back to the legislative committee for consideration. Second, on our committees, and it's something that I've been observing as I have attempted to help kind of see what's going on, is knowing that a lot of what we talk about gets into the implementation and the action, and this idea of communication. What are those regular communications? What do we do as advocates? And, we are never all going to agree, we're never going to have consensus. We have a charge as members to bring here and bring our best thinking, and to coordinate as best we can information that then goes to the Board of Supervisors. That's who we report to. And I think we know that a lot of this foundational work is now yielding recommendations that we then need to, communicate, and whether it's activating a grassroots response or others. I am privy to a lot of side emails and conversations, as all of you are, and seeing things in the press about how things work. And I'm going to say that we're going to need to convene that group. I think that we need to take some responsibility. I'm just going to say I've seen some things that I think are dangerous in terms of the public perception of how things get done, or what happens in the homeless system, or even in our property management, that I'd like to talk with you about, because all of us sit on these committees, and I think we have as much of an opportunity or an imperative to educate people and set the record straight on how things happen when sometimes advocates get going and maybe don't have all the information. So I'm putting it out there. There are a couple of specific things have come out, but I'd like to follow up when we get that communications committee going. how do we ensure that we're both educating, that we're providing factual data, and that we're suggesting ways to resolve things if we're unhappy about the way things are going. So I'm going to leave it at that and go from there. So we are at time. I wanted to call your attention to the fact that we have suggested some some dates. If you had time to check your schedule, what I would say is these are the proposed dates for the full council, because we don't have anything scheduled past our next meeting. And we chose those dates thinking about religious school holidays, and most important, what was the cycle of work for AHAC. So if you all can take a look at if anybody sees any obvious conflicts on this, if you could let me or Regina know, but that's what we're going to be proposing at the next AHAC meeting, which is coming up. Oh, good. And Navaja will be announcing the new executive director. Anything else? That's with mixed emotion, but we know Michelle's not done. So it's thrilling for Navaja, but any other comments? Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
y'all.